NFL's PowerCast, sponsored by thepowermagazine.com, howmuchyourbench.net, and BSN, makers of NO Explode. Look for BSN products at bodybuilding.com. Alongside Silent Mike and Jim McD, here's your host, Mark Bell.
That guy got his ass kicked, and you broke it up. That was great that you broke it up. You saw it, Jim, right? Did you get any of that on camera, the fight in the gym?
I did not.
I love how
the guy got thrown over the bench. That was so weird.
I don't know how they threw all 450 pounds of them.
Anyway, we got Layne Norton on the show today, so let's talk a little bit about him. You know anything about him, Mike?
He's kind of jacked. He has to be tanned. I think he lives in Miami or somewhere.
Yeah,
in
if you're not
Florida.
tanned,
Miami? Moon's over Miami.
Yeah.
My favorite.
If you're not tanned in Florida, you're doing something wrong.
He's got big biceps because he's a bodybuilder. Pro bodybuilder.
Natural.
Those bodybuilders are weak, right?
Very weak because
Yeah.
he only deadlifts more than all of us.
He deadlifts like 7. I think he did like 705 or something.
Yeah,
right?
in a mock meet. But
He's been in a couple regular meets too.
Who were they mocking?
Yeah, and I think in a
Mockingbird?
I might be wrong, but I think it was USAPL, and he did.
Mockingbird. Yeah.
Yeah. The recordings going on for that movie. It was canceled
For what? Dumb and Dumber.
Dumb and Dumber
part
2.
3.
It's 2, but it's TOO.
Yeah.
I was gonna say they could call it 2 because 2 was so bad.
Yeah, but it's with
It could be 2-2.
It's with Jim Carrey, and it was canceled. I heard he threw a fit. Maybe that's just a rumor. And then it's back on yesterday or something.
So good.
It's going to be really good.
It was such a good movie.
They look the same, which is funny. You know, you put a little makeup and hair on those guys.
I don't know. They look a lot older to me, but
In the poster I saw, they look the same.
Jim Carrey's starting to look like Bill Macy to me. Oh,
I don't even know that.
Do you guys know that I had a heart attack like over the weekend, basically?
You sneezed your brains out.
Yeah, I don't. It was scary. I couldn't breathe for a couple days.
Was it
It
your?
was fucking nuts.
And it had nothing to do with your bunghole this time.
No, you know what? My butthole was okay. It was after we did those good mornings, but I think I
Your butthole
hurt something in my breasticles, and I don't know. It was weird. I couldn't breathe, and it got worse and worse. On Tuesday, we did those good mornings and those deadlifts and stuff. So I was thrashing on myself pretty hard, but that's normal, right? That happens at super training. And then Wednesday, I got a little bit more jacked up, and then Thursday, I couldn't breathe. It was getting worse and worse, and then I got worried about it.
Yeah.
And it made it even worse.
Right.
My heart started to kind of race a little bit, and I was like, "Fuck! I don't understand what this is." It felt different than anything I've ever had before. So
Well, it's a really good thing we're having Dr. Layne Norton on.
I know he could check me out. He can give me a
I think
checkup.
he's best friends with Dr. Phil.
I don't think he's that kind of doctor.
I think Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz are. So
Yeah, well.
But I went to the ER and they didn't check my bunghole. That's probably where they should have started.
you didn't tell him? Like, what's bothering you, sir? Well,
Yeah,
They didn't start from the bottom.
they should have. They should have started from the bottom. Then we'd be here.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But, anyway, so I had that little scare over the weekend. That kind of sucked. Or
Phil,
over the last couple days.
I think it was from the strain of being on Barbell Shrug.
that could have been it.
Yeah.
Gave me a heart attack.
I didn't have any of that strain since.
That's is that today? No, wait. It
yeah,
took place.
it's today. So it'll
Thursday.
be a week. It'll be a week ago.
It'll be a week ago.
When
Wait
this
a
comes
second.
out.
What the hell's going on here?
where's McFly when
We're
you need
time
him?
traveling.
Yeah, where the fuck's McFly?
The video episode that came out Sunday, which was whatever the hell that was. I don't remember. Oh, we were talking about goals and
Right.
whatever. Somebody flamed us for not calling out Johnny Candido for his third place finish at IPF Worlds, and it's like, that happened, after we recorded that.
Right,
So
right.
Yeah, what does that have to do with anything? Like,
I don't
Johnny's
know.
an amazing lifter.
He's a cool dude too.
Who is he?
Johnny Candido.
I don't even know.
It's a little 181, all natural.
You met him.
Went to
You
IPF.
met him at the Arnold. Not that you
Okay.
didn't meet a lot of other people at the Arnold.
Yeah, true.
But he, I don't know what he told me, maybe 1,500 at
Nice.
the IPF juniors,
Right.
one third in the world, which is a huge accomplishment. But I mean, we got a lot of bungholes to talk about. No offense, Candido.
There's a lot of good lifters out there. It's hard to get everybody.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what if we congratulated every single person?
Yeah, I know.
Not saying he's not worthy, but
we could spend half the time. This is the same reason that you don't put meet results in Power Magazine, because the whole
Right.
magazine would be meet results.
Exactly. There's too many meats going on.
Yeah.
Lots of meat.
Yeah, it's not a
meet
newsletter.
results, and bad bunghole.
Something like that.
Something like that.
You never know.
No.
All right. What else is new in your life, honey? I got some shit to talk about. Let's see.
I don't know what else is new. What
So-
else is new in your life, baby cakes?
So did your shit
That
all
shit.
check out okay?
But yeah, all the blood work, everything checked out.
And
right.
every one of your nurses was fat as fuck, huh?
No, actually,
Oh.
I had a cute one in the middle of the night. It was good.
In the middle of the night.
Yeah, in the middle of the night.
The night shift, just to get everybody excited.
Night shift.
Well, I think I was telling you a couple days ago that I had that same kind of experience a few years ago. I was maybe a little bit older than you. I'm not a ton, though. I ended up in the ER in the middle of the night because I had some kind of pain that just did not want to fucking go away in my chest. And
I think you just said that you were older than me a long time ago.
I was older than you a long time ago. I was. I've been
crazy.
older than you forever.
Yeah.
There's way too much time talk right now. My
Yeah,
brain is
exactly.
exploding.
A
right now.
lot of math going on.
Actually, speaking of time, that's the way to remember the difference between then and than. Because then is always about time and it rhymes with when.
Oh, fuck.
When?
When? Now.
Hen?
When will then be now?
How now, brown cow?
Exactly.
Oh, my God. I'm so lost. I need more caffeine to understand this.
You're off caffeine.
I'm on coffee only.
Oh.
Well, I think that's cheating.
No
Yeah.
way. What's in a cup of coffee? Like maybe 80 milligrams of
Oh,
caffeine?
you're kidding yourself.
Yeah.
No, regular coffee, like a regular
You're off
8
the
ounce.
team. You're full of shit.
That's got to be like 80 to 120 maximum. What's in like Endo Rush or some of these suckers?
Nice Reebok shirt, by the way.
I think it's about this. Isn't it about the same?
Ka-shing!
Isn't it about the same as a cup of coffee?
No way, no way. Endo Rush is like 250 milligrams. That's like 5 cups of coffee.
Oh, that's crazy.
And it makes your brain on fire. You turn into Einstein just in
Yeah.
an instant. That's
Yeah.
why I can't keep up with the conversation because you're both on Endo Rush and I'm not.
Actually, I'm sorry. I don't do any of that stuff.
I don't do Endo
I don't do
Rush.
it.
How much is in White Monster? That's
Probably
Yeah,
150.
That was gross.
Yeah, everybody loved that, though.
Let's not tackle that white monster again.
Everybody loved that.
Jim's riding the white monster off into the sunset.
didn't really happen like
Sounds
that.
so crazy.
White
White
did not
Monster.
really
That's in
happen
West
like that.
Hollywood, right? The White Monsters.
For some reason, I picture him like on a pool floaty, the white monster, and, like, riding. Riding.
Did you see that picture of Trustin Scholl in his pool?
Oh my god!
Speaking of trust and riding white monsters, there is a picture. There's probably more than one of them from a meet years back. We were all staying in hotel rooms for this meet of Juan riding Tristan like
Yeah,
he's
that
a
sounds disgusting.
bucking bronco
with a belt around his neck.
Tristan looked like
with
a
a belt around.
That
his
was a
neck.
bad weekend. We shouldn't talk about that. That was weird.
he looked like
Which
a
one was
albino
that?
hippo-
A lot of weird shit went down.
Was that the one where there were 5 of us in the same room,
I think
including
so.
Shannon Hartnett?
I think that meant
Yeah,
that might have been it.
yeah.
That was a weird. Everything was weird.
You guys are weird. Can we talk about something like nutritional?
Okay.
All right. Well, we got Dr.
Let's call
Layne
him.
Norton on the show. We're going to call him up in just a couple seconds here, but we're going to have him try to help us make sense of all this shit. Low carb, no carb, high carb, low carb.
How to get
High
jacked?
fat.
How to get jacked
Am I
and
going
strong?
in and out? Am I going
Yeah,
in
you
and
just
out?
it wasn't
We're
you.
fading in and out.
It isn't you. You're fine.
It's
All
just
right.
the DJ.
But anyway, yeah, he's going to help us work out some of that information just because there's so much of it and you don't know which way to turn sometimes.
Yeah, maybe we'll start with a rapid fire Q&A of definitions.
Okay.
Hell yeah, let's call him up.
All right. Why don't we take a break while we get him on the phone, and we'll come back with Dr. Layne Norton.
Hey. So, Layne, we got to go over. We've been talking on the podcast lately about people's iron cred. You got street cred. You get a couple bullet wounds and stuff like that, and your street cred goes up. So we got to talk a little bit about your iron cred. And I'd have to take points off automatically off the top because we can actually see your neck. You actually have a neck. So that's points off. However, you receive a point because if you have a neck, that tells us that you're probably natural. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, yeah.
but,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you have a 700.
Always good to hear.
You have
I'll work harder to try and make my neck go away.
Yeah, there we go. More donuts probably.
Yeah, that would help.
You have a 700-pound contest deadlift. Is that correct?
699.96. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
Stupid kilos.
700.
Yeah, that's so your iron cred goes back up again. And what's your best? What's your best squat?
Well, it's sumo, right? That's like half a
Well,
point deduction.
actually, the one in competition was conventional. That was a few years ago.
Oh,
But
all right.
recently I
Plus
pulled
2.
705 sumo, not in competition, but in the gym.
Okay, Mike is adding this up on his his iron cred calculator.
Did you have abs at the time that you pulled that?
I did.
Plus 3?
What was the body weight when you pulled that 700?
Like 218, 219.
Oh, all right, there we go. That's pretty good to be that body weight and have abs too.
What's our arm measurements at the moment?
What's that?
Arm measurements?
Oh hell, I don't know.
Oh, you know. We
please.
all know.
No, I actually don't.
Come
I
on
actually
now.
don't. I will tell you
on.
this: that my best ever
Come on.
was like just over 18.
All
But
right,
I don't.
okay.
I honestly haven't
All right,
measured
well,
my
there's
arms
two
in
more
probably
points.
Yeah,
12 months.
Over
really,
18's.
You're
Definitely.
really running up the score.
I know. Well, let's find some negatives.
Kind of being a jerk, actually.
See, I feel like I should get more, especially in the powerlifting community, more cred for not measuring my arms. You
Oh,
know,
yeah,
like
well,
I feel like
you
that should
probably
be
do.
like, oh yeah, like this guy's kind of one of us. You know, he's not one of these pretty boy bodybuilders, but he does have a neck. So
Hey,
that hurts
any
him bad.
any barbed wire tattoos?
No barbed wire tattoos.
All
I'm
right,
afraid.
there you
no
go. There's
tattoos
another point.
actually of any kind.
Oh, there we go. There we go. All right, and let's see. We got the deadlift out of the way. So what about the squat? What's your best squat in the competition?
Best squat in competition's 617.
And that's just in knee sleeves.
Just in knee sleeves, yeah.
All right, I'll give you a point for that. And then what do we got
All
on the
right.
bench?
Best bench in competition 391.
All right, we got to take off some serious points.
And there go the points right there.
there
Knew
goes
that shit
almost.
was coming.
Yeah, there goes almost all your chips. on
Thanks
that
for
one,
playing.
That one shot. Anyway, man, we need to have you clear some
Poverty
shit up.
Poverty bench.
Yeah, there you go. We need to have you. Well, basically, you did nearly a 2 times body weight bench press, right? Close to it. You got to.
Yeah.
Maybe at 198, you'll have a better shot.
when I do Raw Nationals in like 6 weeks, my plan is to be at around 205 in the 93 kilo weight class.
That's USAPL?
And, what's that?
That's USAPL?
Yeah, USAPL.
So that's a long pause. Iron cred goes up a little bit.
Yeah.
How
yeah.
much-
Well, actually, my 391 was at USAPL. So
How
there you
much?
go.
How much DECA do you run going into these USAPL meets?
Well, you forget. Hey, look at this neck. Look at this neck.
See, all of those online arguments could have been solved by you showing your neck.
Yeah,
That's true.
he's
That's
got
true.
a neck. He's fine.
No back knee. You know, I don't have the red puffy face.
Still
You
handsome.
know?
I take offense to that red puppy face. That was targeted. Right, that was directed towards me. I understand.
It was. Shots fired. Shots
There you
fired.
So
Make
we
fun of
need
my
to
bench
have
press.
you.
That's pretty good.
We're not smart enough over here. We're not doctors, and so we need to have you.
We don't
clear
even play one on TV or the internet.
No, yeah, we need to have you clear some stuff up for us. Just some simple terms. If you can give us a little bit of a rapid fire definition on the following terms, just give us a definition of what's fat.
What is fat?
Yeah,
We're
what is
talking
fat?
nutritionally, yeah?
Yeah, nutritionally. Yeah,
Nutritionally.
right.
Okay. So, like, what would I consider somebody to be fat at?
No, just from a nutritional standpoint, like what is fat? Like a fat, calorie or whatever.
Yeah,
Oh,
just
well,
a basic summary.
Just a lipid that basically carbohydrate and I'm sorry, carbohydrate, carbon and hydrogen and carboxyl group and. I see. It's hard for me because I'm trying to think of if it's from a biochemistry perspective or from a physiological perspective. But essentially, fats are macronutrient that it's 9 kilocalories per gram, and I just don't. It's a very very broad
No, that's
question.
perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah, and then carbohydrates.
Carbohydrates 4 kcals per gram can be stored as glycogen. Can also be converted to fat as well through de novo lipogenesis.
And then protein.
Protein is the only nitrogen-containing macronutrient, 4 calories per gram, although it does seem to have a greater effect on thermogenesis than the other 2 macronutrients, and also the only macronutrient that stimulates muscle protein synthesis.
And what about insulin?
Insulin is a hormone that helps control blood glucose, so as insulin goes up, it will lower blood glucose, and it also has effects on lipolysis in terms of inhibiting lipolysis and increasing lipogenesis.
And what is
Lipolysis.
What is lipolysis?
Lipolysis is liberation of fatty acids from adipose tissue, i.e., I don't want to say fat burning because you actually have to oxidize them,
Right.
but it's kind of like it basically frees up.
Yeah, release,
fat
maybe releasing.
Releases fat from adipose.
And what about metabolism?
Metabolism is all the functions that go into extracting energy or actually creating energy and extracting energy and the transfer of energy.
So I heard recently you said that your metabolism, and this is really crucial for people to understand, your metabolism, and this goes for everybody, your metabolism is not static.
No, yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
I thought that was a really good point. And so through some of your more recent messages, I've kind of gathered that basically you're saying in a way that if you can teach your body to consume more, that you'll probably be better off than the next guy, because at some point you can take some of those things away and you can lose body fat rapidly, such as like carbohydrates. Teach your body to eat 800 grams of carbohydrates without gaining fat.
That'd be tough, but
right. It'd be hard, but you teach your body to eat larger amounts for whatever your given number is, and over a period of time, you can then pull those carbs back out, and you can drop significant amounts of body fat. Is that kind of some of the things that you've been saying recently, or I'm misinterpreting some of that?
No, that's a good synopsis. So the one I always tell people is like, look, you have to look at things in terms of a long-term perspective. All right. I mean, you probably know people like this, most of whom are women. Who eat poverty macros. They eat very little calories. They do a bunch of cardio, and they can't drop body fat. Everybody knows those people who do.
I love that term, poverty.
What's that?
I love that term, poverty macros.
Poverty calories, poverty macros. Yeah. So, and these are people who have just undereaten for long periods of time, and so their metabolism is very slow. So it has adapted to that low level of intake. I mean, if you think about it from a evolutionary survival perspective, it makes sense. And then, so the opposite's also true. If you eat more, your body will get less efficient with calories, and you will expend more energy as heat. But I always, what I try to term to people is when I'll talk about like a high carb diet versus a low carb diet versus this and that. And I'll tell people, look, that is very individual. I'm talking about within individuals. Okay. High carb for one person may be low carb for another. And what I mean by is I have a friend who actually lives out, I think, close to you guys. His name's Alberto Nunez, and he's another natural bodybuilder, and he does powerlifting as well.
Who's ridiculously shredded right now.
Yes, and he is that way. He got that way dieting on about 400 grams of carbs per day.
Oh, shit.
Okay? For most people, 400 grams of carbs would be high carb. For him, that's low carb. Okay? So people have to understand, and this is why it's always so dangerous to look at somebody and say, oh, I'm going to do what they do because look at how shredded they are. Well, what they do may not be applicable for your personal metabolism, or it may not be applicable for where your metabolism is right now. And I've seen people go from, I mean, when I worked with Alberto, this was years ago, and we had to diet him down on 100, by the end of his contest prep, he was down to around 150 grams of carbs per day.
Right.
And now he's able to consume far more than that. So obviously metabolism is not static, and you can kind of move the needle depending on where you are. And if you feed yourself, you train hard, you can, become, get a faster metabolism. Now, not everybody can become an Alberto Nunez where you're eating 800 grams of carbs a day in the off season, not gaining body fat. Not everybody can do that, but you can get better from where you are. And what I always tell people in terms of long-term fat loss potential, think about who do you think is going to have an easier time dropping body fat? The person who maintains their body weight on 4,000 calories a day, or the person who maintains it on 2,000 calories a day?
Right, yeah.
It's going to be the person who maintains it on 4,000 calories a day, right? And they're also, anybody who's ever run a sustained period of kind of fat loss, that you hit certain sticking points. Just because you say, okay, well, I'm dropping 1,000 calories off my daily intake, so I'm going to lose 2 pounds a week. Well, do you lose 2 pounds a week till indefinitely? No, you lose, a few pounds a week, and then, a few weeks or a couple months in, you hit a sticking point, and you have to get more aggressive. And so if you've got more room to cut from, you can push yourself through more of those sticking points. And so I think that's a kind of a concept that gets lost on a lot of people.
I would assume that if you had somebody ramp their carbohydrates up, especially into the 400 range, that the fat is relatively low. Is that true, or just kind of?
I typically bring up carbs and fats kind of in a pretty even association. In that, like if I'm going to jump, let's say somebody jumps up 100 grams of carbs over a 3-month, 4-month period, their fat will usually come up 10, 15, 20 grams, something like that as well. I try to keep it in balance.
So
now,
it's equal on a calorie level. Is that what you're referring to?
Not always, but sometimes it'll be. But the point being, it's in balance. So if you start at, let's say, 200 grams of carbs per day and 50 grams of fat, Well, by the time you get up to 400 grams of carbs or 500 grams of carbs, I'm going to have you up to around 80 to 100 grams of fat, right? So it's going to be somewhat imbalanced. Now, I will take a close look at how people respond to various manipulations, and I have seen anecdotally this. I don't have any data, from studies to support this, but anecdotally, I've seen some people will tend to do a little bit better with adding a little bit more calories from fat as opposed to carb, and vice versa. So if I notice somebody is having that response, then I might get a little bit more unbalanced with the approach in terms of adding more fats versus more carbs. But that's something that I have to see consistently over a long period of time to get confident with that being what I want to do. But typically, I'm going to try and add them in a pretty good balance.
So what are a few things that people can do to help increase their metabolism? Obviously, you got something like lifting weights and gaining muscle mass.
Yep, that's a huge deal. And one of the things people get very caught up in diet. And I did my PhD in nutrition. I'm a big fan of nutritional manipulations. But your greatest tool for changing your body composition is training. People talk about, it's 80% nutrition or it's this or that. Look, the needle does not move unless you train, okay? Now, if you train and you have good nutrition, they can have a synergistic effect. But if you just eat more protein, you're not going to add a bunch of muscle. Like, that's just not going to happen. But if you train hard, that can make a big difference. But as you know, Mark, there's so many people out there who are concerned with their body, the way their body looks, who don't even have any concept of like periodization or anything like that. They just go in and do like 3 sets of 10 for everything and walk out of the gym, and they're really hurting themselves in terms of what they can do for their body composition. So building more muscle is one, and two is not beating. First off, like, don't go on starvation diets to begin with. That's the biggest thing. People do that all the time. They go on because Dr. Oz had it on his show, HCG diet, or they go on a super low carb diet, or they go on, they go on a paleo diet or whatever it is. And what happens is, a lot of times they'll lose some body fat, but the overwhelming statistics show, and this is like 95 to 98% of people, whatever they lose on those sorts of diets, they put it all back on. And for 1/3 to 2/3 of people, they actually add more body fat than they had before they ever even started dieting.
Because their metabolism changed?
What's that?
Because their metabolism changed?
Well, I think there's a couple aspects to it, but sure. So what happens is you eat a low-calorie diet, your metabolism drops back down. Now, let's just look at a competitor just because it's an easy thing, and we're kind of in that industry, and it's an easy thing to understand. So let's say somebody goes on a super low-calorie diet to get ready for competitions. This happens all the time, especially with like bikini and figure competitors. 800,000 calories. I've seen quite a few diets like this, and they'll get lean enough. Well, what happens is their body is adapting that whole time they're eating that low calories. And so now their metabolism is pushed way down. They may be lean, for that show, but then what happens when they start eating like they did before? Well, first off, the urge to binge psychologically after a show is huge, or even after any diet. And so they go eat, 2,000-3,000 calories per day, or sometimes even more. And your body is an amazingly efficient storage machine for fat, especially if you've been following low calories. And a lot of these people, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, will blow up 20, 30, 40 pounds even a couple months after a show.
Yeah.
And so, now you've put yourself in the position where you've put on all this body fat, and in a lot of cases you've put on more than you lost. Only you've done it in such a short period of time that your metabolic rate hasn't even caught back up to what you used to be previously. And so now what happens a lot of times is these people will immediately start trying to diet back down, but since their metabolic rate hasn't recovered, fat loss becomes less effective. And so you get people who are eating low calories who have a lot more body fat and have trouble losing it. So I tell people, like, the biggest thing is this is a concept I teach to people: diet on as many calories as you can. Okay, if you can, so if you've got, let's just use a powerlifting meet just for example. You want to lose 20 pounds so you can make this weight class, right? And you decide you're going to do that about 2 pounds a week. You're going to do it in 10 to 12 weeks, which I think is a reasonable rate if somebody's like over 200 pounds. Well, if you could lose 2 pounds a week eating 2,400 calories, don't eat 1,800. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
eat 2,400.
That makes sense.
But a lot of people miss this concept, and they'll just say, well, I've got all this weight to drop, so I'm just going to eat as low calories as I can. Or I didn't feel hungry today, so I'm just going to eat less. Well, no, you're missing out the point of what can happen in the long term to your metabolic rate. And your metabolic rate is your biggest determinant of your long-term fat loss potential. And I try to really impress that upon people.
Just observationally, and we've certainly seen any number of powerlifters, even folks who are natural, who cut weight for a show, cut weight for a meet, and then gain a lot of weight. They end up weighing more than they did when they started.
Absolutely.
And, the meat effect, I guess, is what we call it. I don't know if it's because they get into a binge mode afterwards, especially if they didn't do well,
Yeah.
or what, really what's at work there. But
That's
we've seen it
certainly
so
part of
many
it.
times.
You're having the compound effect of eating a lot of calories with their metabolic rate being still low, not being recovered from that.
Right.
When somebody finishes competition with me, I like to do what's called a reverse diet. So you want to slowly add calories back in. Now that's very hard.
Right.
Because anybody who's ever done that after a diet, what do you want to go? You want to go eat, right? But I tell people, I'm like, look, I want to feed you, okay, but you don't have to eat all this stuff tonight. You can eat it over. We can get your metabolic rate back up over the next few months. And the great thing is you get to keep some of this leanness. You're not going to go back. But you mentioned that you see a lot of people, they end up being fatter than they were before.
Right.
And that actually happens so frequently that's not a weird thing. There's actually a scientific term for that. It's called body fat overshooting. If you go to PubMed and type in body fat overshooting, you will get like a ton of hits. It's been shown in research studies over and over.
It's probably pretty dangerous as well, like in terms of your blood pressure and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really looked into it from that aspect. It's actually interesting. This is going to sound weird, but there isn't a whole lot of evidence that the health effects from blood pressure improving and that sort of thing are from the actual weight loss. Okay, now that might sound weird in terms of dieting. But they've been able to show that just the lifestyle modification, so for example, just exercising and eating a little bit less calories, that actually can improve your blood pressure, it can improve your blood lipids without that much body fat loss. So there's actually some people who have suggested that what's called fat but fit, and people who they've had people. I mean, hell, everybody knows somebody who runs like marathons and stuff who's still overweight. Right. Are you going to try to say that they're not in shape because they have excess body fat? So it's kind of we're at a real interesting area of physiology where the best thing I can tell people, and this is going to be like I said, the evidence out there shows that diets fail 95% of the time because people can't keep the weight off. And I think that's a behavioral thing, and I think it's also there's some physiology behind it. But the biggest thing is to not get the excess body fat in the first place, because all the data shows that once you have it, it is extremely hard to get rid of it and keep it off. I mean, we'll see, magazines show these amazing transformations, somebody who lost 100 pounds. Well, show me that person 3 years later.
Right.
A lot of times you'll see people who do these huge transformations, and then a few months later they fall off the face of the earth. You know what I mean? Because they put it all back on. That's not every single person, but the statistics show it's a large majority of people. In fact, there was a study done on the people who did the Biggest Loser, and 98% of those people, they actually end up adding back everything they lost or more.
Wow.
Yeah, it's bad.
Do you think that it's too difficult and ideal to maintain? I mean, maybe that's part of the problem is that they get to a certain point and they just can't maintain it. They're shooting too high, I guess. Is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, I think that like for example, I know some people who can. Let me take it for competition in bodybuilding. I know some people who can maintain almost a stage lean year round. Like for example, Alberto Nunez.
Yeah.
But for most people, that is not going to be a reasonable expectation. And I have to tell this to a lot of my clients. I'm like, look, get that out of your head. All right, your favorite fitness competitors who you see in magazines and guess what? They don't look like that year round either. Okay, they did all those photo shoots in a 2-week time period.
Right.
Okay, so stop thinking that they walk around shredded like that. Now that's not to say that you can't have a nice lean physique. But this idea that you're going to have a shredded six-pack year-round, that wasn't what we were put on here. For most people, if you get that lean, guess what? You feel like shit. Okay,
Yeah.
So evolutionarily speaking, it wouldn't be wise for you to look great and feel like crap all the time if you couldn't go out and hunt. You know what I mean?
So if you were setting reasonable goals for people who are, say, on Biggest Loser, what would you tell them to do? How would you tell them, what would be an acceptable physique for them that they could maintain?
Well, I think the biggest thing I would tell them is like, look, you didn't put on all this weight in 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. You're not going to take it off.
Right.
And if you do, the statistics overwhelmingly show that you'll put it all back on. Okay. What the data shows is that the slower you lose it, the more likely you are to keep it off. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And I believe there was a large Haines study done. This was years ago, looking at kind of the opposite of the statistics I've been talking about. So who are the people who are successful with dieting? Who loses a significant amount of body fat and actually keeps it off? And the statistics show with that one, there are people that lost it very slow and consistently, and two, there are people who basically always self-monitor, and they have made that part of their lifestyle. Uh-huh. So when I say self-monitoring, tracking your macronutrients, those sorts of things, they're doing some sort of active, self-monitoring. For most people, they don't want to be bothered with that. I've gotten people who say, I'll do anything to lose body fat. And then I ask them to track their protein, carb, and fat intake. And they're like, well, that shit's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, well, guess what? It's going to be hard. You got yourself in a tough position.
Right. My sister is contemplating bariatric surgery right now, and she's very overweight. And I actually went with her to the intro meeting for Kaiser, because she's got Kaiser.
Is that like some sort of stomach procedure?
Yeah. There are a couple of different
stapling or banding. Or
right.
Most of them do banding now, I think.
Right. Depends on. There are certain factors that you can only do certain ones with certain people.
Right.
I don't remember all the criteria, but they actually tell them, you have been unsuccessful at dieting in your life, and there's no way you are ever going to lose the weight on your own, and you have to have this surgery, which blew my mind. But I wasn't there to cause trouble. But I mean, what is your opinion?
Well, it's also money in their pocket.
Exactly. But what's your opinion on that kind of surgery? Period.
Well, here's what the data shows on people who get bariatric surgery. It is successful. They will lose weight, and they will likely never be lean. Okay, She will likely lose a good amount of weight, but she will never be a lean individual. And the reason for that is because she won't be able to eat much. All right. So her metabolism is going to be
very slow.
Significantly slower by the end. By the time she gets near the end. Now, so she has to have realistic expectations that I'm never going to have 15, 20% body fat, but maybe I can go from having, I don't know where she is, maybe I can go from having 50% body fat to, 30% body fat or something of that nature, right? So if she's okay with that, then that's fine. But she also needs to understand the downsides to bariatric surgery, which I've known people who have had all kinds of GI problems. I had a gal who almost blew out her bariatric her banding,
right?
Because what these people don't realize is that what bariatric surgery it really isn't that advanced. Okay, it makes you eat less. Okay, it forces you to diet because if you do not diet, you will get violently ill.
Right.
Okay, if you try to eat a bunch of food, you will get really, really sick and feel like shit. So that's essentially how it makes you diet. I mean, you just can't eat more than much of a palm-sized portion of food at any sitting because your stomach won't tolerate it.
Right.
So it's not some magical, physiological wonder. It just basically puts a gun to your head and makes you diet.
I got a couple questions on Instagram for you, and I'm going to add a question on top of it for myself. One of the questions is what amount of protein
I saw this one.
is best, and is there too much? And my question is there, and I believe it might be, is it Chris Helms is kind of doing a thesis on this right now as we speak? Eric. Yeah, sorry. And so what's optimal for maybe a competitive or a lifter, power lifter, bodybuilder, and then what's, maybe optimal for the average person?
Well, I looked at this a lot with my PhD, and even though I didn't directly ask this question, a lot of the data we got back answered quite a bit of it. And it's complex and individualistic, but I will tell you this: I love protein. I did my PhD in protein. I went in to my PhD eating about 1.5 grams per pound of body weight protein, and I was looking for reasons to eat more protein. And by the time I was done with my PhD, I ate less protein. I backed it down to about 1 gram per pound. Okay, there just isn't any data to suggest more than 1 gram per pound is beneficial for muscle mass. If you're getting 1 gram per pound of body weight of decent quality protein sources, you're going to be maximizing that anabolic response from protein. And I will get some people who will say, well, what about for some guy, who's on steroids, who's building muscle a lot faster? Okay, well, let's examine that. If you look at how much muscle can somebody put on, and let's say somebody puts on 30 pounds in a year, and I think we'd agree that's a ton of muscle to add in a year. If you actually look at how much tissue that boils down to after you factor out fluid and all those sorts of things, it's like 10 to 15 grams of actual tissue added per day. Okay, so in terms of substrate, you'd only need 10 to 15 more grams of protein. Okay, so this idea that, because I hear this a lot, well, IFBB pros need, 2 grams per pound of body weight and 600 grams of protein a day because they're making so much muscle. No, they don't need that much, They just, it's kind of what they've been told to do. It's bodybuilding dogma, and so everybody does it, but that doesn't make it optimal. It doesn't make it correct. So I tell people, 1 gram per pound, if you want to go up to, 1.5, the data shows that that's not going to hurt you probably, but there's no additional benefit from that.
What about the average person? Maybe a runner or someone that doesn't need, optimal protein synthesis or optimal replenishment.
For a runner, endurance athlete, it's like, I know it in kilos, so it's like 1.4 to 1.6 grams per kilo is about what they would want. So yeah, it'll be a little bit less. It'd be like 0.6 grams per pound.
Yeah, and that's kind of the same for maybe just the average, house mom trying to lose some weight or
I think that a little bit higher protein can have some benefits in terms of thermogenesis. I think for optimal weight loss, maybe 0.8 to 1 gram per pound can be beneficial. But yeah, if you take the average, and that's another one of the problems is these guru personal trainers. They'll take somebody who's just average, who's used to eating 100 grams of protein a day, and they'll be like, all right, here's your plan. Here's 350 grams of protein a day.
Yeah, well, they just can't do it.
Good luck getting them to follow that.
I've always felt that, you always hear people talking about restoring glycogen levels, and I've always felt that it's bullshit. I think that people act like their workouts are so fucking hard that they need to have a marathon of carbohydrates after they exercise. And if you think about a powerlifting workout, I love powerlifting and I always will, but a powerlifting workout is fairly pathetic in terms of how much exercise you actually do. There's a lot of rest. There's low repetitions. And so, what are some of your recommendations post-workout?
Well, I'll tell you this. I definitely agree with you. And even for bodybuilding, the workouts, there's some that are glycogen depleting, but here's the deal. All right. If you eat enough total carbohydrate, you will restore that glycogen over a 24-hour period. Okay. There is no, these people that come out with super fast digesting, carbohydrate drinks and tell you, you need 100 grams of super fast, highly branched amylopectin, post workout. Well, my question is why? Okay. The rate of glycogen resynthesis means absolutely nothing for a bodybuilder or a powerlifter. The reason being, the only reason you need fast glycogen resynthesis is for if you have an event that would be coming up soon after your first event, okay? Most people don't train with weights twice a day. Now, if you did, maybe it'd make a difference, okay? But most people don't train with weights twice per day. Over 24 hours, they're going to restore that glycogen. They don't need that super fast digesting carbohydrate. And I prefer to eat my carbohydrates. I don't like drinking them.
Right.
So I don't use any kind of carbohydrate supplement. I just eat food.
Right.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. And honestly, that stuff is out there because that is a moneymaker for companies because it's cheap and it's easily marketed. And people, oh my God, yeah, glycogen. I need glycogen. You know, it's like, and especially for powerlifters, like I had a powerlifter actually one time in my gym. This guy was an asshole, the kind of person who asks you constantly, but never listens. And I never like to throw around my PhD, like, don't listen to me because I have a PhD. But this guy got really under my skin because he kept asking me questions. And then at the end, he would say, well, I disagree. And this guy was, he had a business degree or whatever. So I usually would try to ignore him. But one day he says, hey, Layne, what do you think about carbohydrate loading the night before a powerlifting competition? And I'm like, well, it's not really glycogen depleting, thing. And, I would just say, just make sure you're eating enough, make sure you're getting, calories in so you have energy and feel good. But I don't think you need a carbohydrate load. And he was like, well, I would disagree with you there. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's not like I did a fucking PhD in this or anything.
That's great.
So I kind of felt bad after that. But actually, the powerlifting coach at the gym came up to me afterwards and said, thank you. That guy always asks questions and he never listens.
So for post-workout, it would be just simple enough just for someone to have some branched chain amino acids or some whey protein or something like that after
I can tell. I'll tell you what I do. I have like 6 grams of branched chain amino acids immediately after my workout, and then I eat food when I get home. How much I have will just depend on my total calorie intake. But right now on my higher carb days, I'm around 400 grams of carbs. So I'll probably have like 100 grams of carbs and 30, 40 grams of protein when I get home from a workout. But I'm not in like, oh my God, I got to get home. If I don't eat within an hour, all my gains are going to be lost. That Alan Argon and Brad Schoenfeld, 2 really good researchers, actually wrote a good paper showing that, for the most part, nutrient timing is pretty much bunk. I do think that there's probably some small benefits to having more carbs pre and post workout because you have better GLUT4, which is a glucose transporter, translocation during that time, and you're a little bit more insulin sensitive. But the idea that you should be getting almost all your carbs pre and post workout, none at the rest of the day, and that nutrient timing just causes so much better than that's BS. The biggest thing is what you eat on a 24-hour basis.
Speaking of nutrient timing, is there anything you do pre-workout that can help? The meal before or 2 meals before you start your exercise for the day?
I mean, I like to train on a full stomach, but everybody's kind of different. Some people can't tolerate that. Some people, feel like they need to be empty when they go to train. So for them, I'll say, well, eat 2-3 hours before you go in. I like to feel pretty full, and I have a cast iron stomach. I could eat like an entire pizza and go in and train a squat session. It wouldn't even bother me.
That's great.
What's that?
I said that's great. It might bother the back spotters though.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where it kind of depends on the person, but and it will depend on your daily intake, right? So if you're dieting down and you're on maybe 150 grams of carbs per day, well, maybe having 50-60 grams of carbs before you go in for your workout, something like that, and then 50-60 grams post workout, that'd be good. But
what about in terms of just holding a little extra water? I used to. You're going to totally laugh at this, but when I was lifting in powerlifting gear and trying to be as bloated and fat as possible, I used to have what I used to call bench bagels. And a bench bagel is basically just a salt bagel. And it basically what it would do is I'd eat like 2 or 3 of those bad boys. It would just help me retain a little bit more water. And I'd have good workouts from it. So is there any benefit to just trying to load your body up with a little bit of carbohydrates so you soak up more water,
a little more leverage,
or is there not enough time? You need more time than just pre-workout.
You're probably gonna get a pretty minimal effect, except for maybe something like a squat or maybe even a bench press. If you touch real low with the bar and you're kind of on your top 2 abs, which is where I am. Especially a squat. You don't want to feel too empty because you're going to lose some of that leverage, having a little bit, kind of, I don't want to say bloat, but, being able to push your stomach out against your belt, is going to get you a little bit better leverage. Now, what I will tell people is, I'm actually, writing some articles about dieting for powerlifting. And one of the things I think that powerlifters do wrong, especially the guys who, they try to drop a bunch of weight, like right before. I knew a guy in my gym who he was usually competing in the 220s, and he decided he wanted to compete in 198. Well, he dropped 25 pounds in a month for that.
Whoa.
Okay. First off, you're going to feel like crap because you're going to have to crash diet. and you can't get all that back in just a 24-hour weigh-in. And the other thing is too is your leverages are going to change so much in that time. I mean, you're going to lose a couple, an inch or two off your waist.
Right.
You're not. It takes time to get used to those new leverages, and how your motor patterns adapt. And then if you, the other side of that is if you lose that much and then you try to put on 10, 15 pounds like right after your weigh-in, by drinking a bunch of water, eating a bunch of stuff, whatever you've kind of adapted to, well, now it's going to be different on meet day. Maybe your belt fits different, and I mean, Mark, this, like just your belt fitting different can throw you way off,
I think basically, people that are under 200 pounds, they can only lose between like 5 to 10 pounds for a meet. And people that weigh a little bit over, they could lose 10 to 15. Anything more than that, you're really starting to stretch what you're capable of. I think.
Yeah, I agree. For example, I'm getting ready for the USAPL Royal Nationals. I'm 207 to 209 right now, and I need to be 205, and it's a 2-hour weigh-in. I want to be 205 the week of the meet. I do not want to be like 207 the week of the meet, or even 209, because I won't have to worry about dropping a bunch of water. You know what I mean? Because I want to be able to just go in and not have that concern, and also know that, okay, whatever I've been doing in the gym, I'm going to repeat that on the platform.
Right.
I'm a big believer in practice like you play. I even, I pause all my reps on bench just because, hey, that's how I'm going to do it in a meet. I do everything. I turn the rack around, well, not the entire rack, but I turn the uprights around so that I'm squatting away from a mirror because, I'm not going to get a mirror in a meet. I'm really trying to make it as much like a meet as I can. And so the same thing, I don't want to be, okay, well, let's say I'm lifting all these weights at 215. Well, do you really think I'm going to be able to do it if I drop down to 205 real quick? I mean, I think people kid themselves with that a lot, that they think they're going to keep all their strength by dropping, 10, 15 pounds.
You mentioned earlier that you're eating about 400 grams of carbs on your higher carb days. And you also mentioned that you're in a deficit trying to cut down slowly for the nationals.
Well, actually, I have to give you guys kind of a timeline. So I cut down earlier this year from about 222, and I got down to about 212, I would say, by the time I did my Australia tour and UK tour, which was in like March, April. And then after I got done with the Australia tour in March, I started reverse dieting. So I started slowly adding in calories. So I've gotten up to this 400 gram level kind of slowly over the last few months. But actually during that time, I dropped another 4 pounds, which is kind of interesting, adding in calories. It just goes to show that metabolism, again, not static.
Yeah.
So I'm continuing to add calories, and what's going to happen is after I think probably next week, I'm going to focus on trying to maybe drop like 1 pound a week for the next 4 weeks. And like I said, be right at like that 204, 205 mark heading into Raw Nationals. But again, because I've been adding calories and been able to maintain my body fat and actually even lose a little bit, it's going to make it that much more easy as opposed to if I just kind of kept cutting straight through, because I probably would, my training wouldn't have been as good. I wouldn't have been able to have as much energy and those sorts of things.
Yeah, eating plenty of food. I was about to say there's I don't know how many questions on my Instagram thing. I didn't even read them all, but I know like 50% of them are about carb cycling, high days, medium days, low days, and refeeds, which are just, higher calories once a week or whatever. You want to just talk shortly on that and those two topics in a deficit and maybe why and when?
Yeah, there's really not a whole lot of data to look at, like, let's say carb cycling versus just kind of keeping them steady. I'm not convinced that carb cycling provides you with any kind of additional metabolic benefit. I mean, there's some proposals out there as to why it might. And, I'm not saying that one's right or wrong. We just don't have that data right now. I will tell you that I do like to cycle people's carbohydrates a little bit because I like them to have, a few higher days just because it's like a carrot on the end of the stick. You know what I mean? You can be feeling bad. You can, you start dieting starting to get into you. But, hey, in 2 days, I've got my high carb day. You know what I mean? And I'll feel better. I'll get to eat more, all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of nice for people because they can plan, some events around it in terms of, okay, well, I'm going to, this week I've got this thing I've got to go to, this dinner I've got to go to. Well, I'll put it on my high carb day. You know what I mean? So from a practical standpoint, I do like implementing them. But I've seen, people say, well, do refeeds because they're going to raise your metabolic rate by, 200% and all this stuff. Well, what the data shows for the most part for refeeding is that your metabolic rate does go up, but it goes up exactly in concert with calorie intake. So as your calories go up, your metabolic rate goes up, and then as soon as you drop them back down, it just drops right back down with it. So the question is, do you get more boost in metabolic rate for how much it impairs fat loss or causes you to gain fat? Because if you eat 1,000 grams of carbs, you're going to gain some body fat from that, regardless of what I've heard people say. Well, you can't gain body fat in one cheat meal. Oh, hell yes, you can. I always, whenever I'm doing seminars, I'll say, how many people have heard that line that you can't gain body fat in one cheat meal? And everybody raised their hand. I said, and how many of you know that's bullshit? And most people raised their hand because they've had a big cheat meal and put on body fat from it, And some people will say, well, it's water. And I was like, water doesn't stick around for 3 months. You know what I mean? So the question is, okay, is there a sweet spot where you can raise your calories and kind of you get more of an increase in metabolic rate than you do increase in body fat gain? And the answer is we don't know. We can speculate about it. Like I said, from a practical standpoint, I like doing some carb cycling, but I don't do these crazy fluctuations. I know some people diet in a way where it's like during the week they'll eat like 50 grams of carbs a day, and then on the weekends they'll like Saturday, Sunday they'll have like 1,000 grams of carbs in each day. And it's like, well, when you're doing that, two things happen. One, you feel like shit no matter what, because when you're doing super low carb, you feel like crap because you have low energy and you don't want to go train. Right. And then when you're doing the super high carb days, you feel like crap because you're bloated and you look really watery. So you're feeling like crap all the time. And
you're also clogging up your toilet probably.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So your significant others aren't going to be real happy with you. And then two, I just find that just turns into a binge. Like that, I don't separate psychology from physiology. And I find that if you told somebody, hey, I want you to eat 1,000 grams of carbs in these 2 days, they just go eat whatever the hell they want.
Right. In talking about the carb cycling, I would just guess that if you're eating more carbs in a particular day, you're probably having more overall calories. And so calories can probably be looked at on a weekly and monthly basis rather than just a daily. Wouldn't you say that would be kind of true?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't know how far I'd push it out, but like, for example, I've had some people who said, I miscalculated something and I went over my carb amount by 20 grams today.
Right.
I said, okay, we'll drop them by 20 grams tomorrow.
Right.
Not a huge deal, Is it perfect? Well, no, probably not. But from a practical standpoint, you're still being consistent, so it's going to wash out. And I'll even have that's how I actually work with some people have like terrible night hunger, like they'll wake up and be like famished. And so what I'll do is I'll say, well, okay, we'll make a meal before you go to bed, something that's easy to consume, and just account for it in your daily macronutrient intake. So. And then if you end up not eating it that night, just add it to your next day's numbers. So, I do kind of, from that point of view, I agree with you and kind of use that to advantage with clients.
You mentioned you don't separate out physiological and psychological. That's something that I'm always trying to preach to people. I like to advise some people to try a low carb diet, especially guys that are fat, guys that are obese, guys that need to drop 40, 50, 60 pounds. And one of the reasons why I like to do that is I just like to pull all the crap out of their diet, have them get rid of all forms of sugar and carbohydrates and everything, just so that they can simply just concentrate on, just eating proteins and fats and just kind of getting into a rhythm. Do you do anything similar with your approach to dieting, or how do you kind of approach these former fat kids?
Well, I mean, for the most part, I think that low carb diets can be useful, and they definitely work for dropping fat. My problem is that it tends to be something difficult to maintain.
Yes.
So if you, like, for example, my dad lost 25 pounds on a ketogenic diet, and he put back on 40. So
right.
It was one of those things where he was actually better off before he started dieting.
You need an exit strategy, basically.
Right, exactly, because are you realistically going to be able to eat that way for the rest of your life? Because you got to ask yourself that question. Because if you can't, then exactly you have to have an exit strategy. So I'm not saying that, because people will ask me all the time, well, you're saying that this doesn't work. No, that's not what I said.
Right.
What I said is you have to mitigate what could happen. Okay, so it absolutely can work, but if you want it to work for long term, you either have to do that for the rest of your life, or like you said, you're going to have to add carbohydrates back in slowly, because if you just say, okay, well, I lost that 40 pounds or 50 pounds or 100 pounds or whatever it was I wanted to lose, I'm just going to go back to eating normal. Well, guess what? That 100 pounds is coming right back.
Yeah, and that's something that's worked well for myself, and so that's kind of part of the reason why I usually advise people to do it. Try about a month or so of low carbohydrates. 3 weeks or so. It doesn't have to be forever, but basically just to get yourself into some good habits, get yourself away from having a sweet tooth and always thinking about ice cream and everything else.
From a psychological perspective, one of the benefits can be, and there's some evidence to this, that if you lose a lot of weight really quickly up front, it's kind of a positive reinforcement, and people respond well to that. Again, I like to be as unrestrictive with diets as possible. That sounds weird. I like for people to be able to eat, quote unquote, ice cream or whatever it is, right, but just teach them kind of moderation, so that way they can still enjoy the things they like to enjoy. It doesn't blow up their life. But, I have had people where it's like, okay, well, Layne said I can have ice cream, so I'm just going to get all my calories from ice cream. And it's like, no, that's not the point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's one of the things I've kind of struggled with people. I'm a big proponent of flexible dieting, but some people can take it to the extreme where they're like, okay, well, I'm going to just get as much from, quote unquote, bad foods as I can. And the problem with that is, well, if you're eating, all Pop-Tarts and ice cream, you're not going to get enough fiber. You're not going to get enough, vitamins, minerals, that sort of thing. So
it's not nutritionally sound.
Right. Well, and so the important thing is to learn how to incorporate those foods in healthy moderation and still, hit your macronutrient intake, hit your fiber intake, those sorts of things.
A lot of the people we deal with or train with us even don't even know what's a good protein source. They think taquitos or bagel bites are, because it has cheese and pepperoni or what are going to get their protein up. They don't even know how many, carbs might be in rice. I'm an advocate of flexible dieting. You show me a plate and I can give you about the macronutrient count.
Absolutely.
Mark's
same way.
Yeah, Mark's been lifting forever, been eating different ways forever. He can do it. Jim's an educated guy. He understands it. But a lot of America can't name 5 good protein sources, 5 good carb sources. How do you start with someone like that?
Well, you're kind of from a government perspective.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so I'm no fan of government, but they do have a difficult job, because you have one of two approaches. You can assume the average person is smart, and you can give them all the information, and you will probably confuse them. Okay, right. Because there's a ton of data out there, and even scientists don't agree on it all. Okay, or you can assume everybody's dumb, and you give them cookie cutter recommendations, which is kind of what we've done right now. And unfortunately, what's happened over the last 20 years is people have gotten fatter and more out of shape. So it's a very, very difficult problem. I will tell people when they come to work with me, I'm like, look, if you're looking for somebody to give you a cookie cutter plan and to just take totally the thought process out of it, you should not hire me. You should go find somebody else.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to make you think. Okay, I'm going to make you, figure out something, because I want you to learn. Okay, it's kind of like give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for the rest of his life. That skill of learning to count your macronutrients. I went to school for 6 years to do my PhD in nutrition, and still the most I ever learned about nutrition was actually making myself track my macronutrient intake.
Yeah,
I learned so much by that, because you really don't know what you're taking in unless you do that. I have people all the time come to me, well, I eat clean. Okay, well, what the hell does that mean? All right, what's your protein? What's your protein, carb, and fat intake? And then they actually track it. They're like, oh my God, I had no idea it was like this. And it's like, well, yeah, So I think for the most part, people want something, quote unquote, easy. So they just tell me, well, just tell me eat these foods, not these foods.
You're right.
Okay, well, again, that's not maintainable for the long term. So I try to teach people how to do this because it's a life skill. So like you said, I mean, part of flexible dieting doesn't mean I take a scale to a restaurant. You know what I mean? Now, if I'm dieting down for a show or something like that and I've got an event, well, then maybe I have to get a little more, restrictive. But part of it is, okay, if I go out with friends, it's not a cheat meal if I go to a restaurant. I just, if I can find the nutritional info online, I plug it in. And if not, I can look at that plate and say, okay, there's probably 75 grams of carbs and 20 grams of fat and 35 grams of protein in there, Right. And so I'm still doing some form of self-monitoring. When I talked about the most successful dieters are constant self-monitors. So it's not, I didn't sit down and say, screw it, this is a cheat meal, I'm just having whatever I want. I said, okay, well, this is about this, this, and this, you don't have that psychological implications of a cheat meal, which I think is lost on a lot of people. When you tell somebody cheat meal, it tends to become eat everything you can.
Well, fat people didn't get fat by understanding moderation.
That is true.
Mark and I have compared a lot Weight Watchers, which is, I'm no fan of fad diets and flexible dieting, though. Weight Watchers at its rawest form is counting equivalent points to your body weight to nutritional facts without having to actually count. What do you think about, I think you're the captain at this flexible dieting and moderation world. What do you think about revising something like that and making it, globally, or at least for in America, something a little more understandable that way?
Well, with the Weight Watcher stuff, I always tell people, I'm like, if you can teach yourself to do these points thing, hell, you can just teach yourself to do macronutrients, because there's so many apps out there and there's so many websites out there that basically you just plug in what you ate and it'll do it for you, you know? So I just prefer people to teach that. I am kind of the opinion that for the most part, if something is important to people, they're going to make a priority to do it or they're not. Okay. So if somebody really, really, really wants to lose body fat, they would be willing to learn this stuff. And if not, then they don't really want to. And for the most part, I think most people don't really want to. They don't want it more than they want to have to sacrifice, Yeah. That's like, you guys know who Eric Thomas is, the hip hop preacher who does like motivational videos and stuff. You guys ever seen him?
Yeah, I love him.
Yeah. Well, he's sitting there in a classroom for kids, and he's like, all you say you want to be successful, but you don't want it more than you want to be cool. You don't want it more than you want to party. You don't want it even more than you want to lose sleep. You don't want it more than you even want to get up your cell phone, And it's kind of the same thing with trying to diet to lose fat, is that, most people, for the most part, they're not willing to alter their lifestyle, which is why they do these ridiculous diets because or cleanses or whatever they are, because they're like, oh, okay, I can just take a pill or I can just do a 24-hour cleanse and that'll solve my problem or whatever it is, because they don't want to change their lifestyle because it's hard, and the fact of the matter is that, Mark, you guys know this. You guys run a business. You're a successful powerlifter, successful businessman. If you want to do something good, it's going to be fucking hard.
Yeah, there's no easy money out there.
That's absolutely 100% right.
You got to put a lot of time in. Where should somebody start? You mentioned protein, approximately 1 gram per pound. I realize that the carbohydrates vary a ton, but just give us some basics on what you think where people's fat should be and where their carbs should be.
Well, I don't recommend going lower on fats than like 20% of total calories from fats. As far as carbs, like I said, it's just so variable, and it depends on your goals, Right. So are we talking about like fat loss?
I guess, fat loss, I guess, would be a good place to start.
I would, here's what I do. I get people to track what they're eating and try to, I'm like, look, be honest with yourself. Be honest with me, okay? Don't try to impress me by eating super clean for like 3 days and, you come back and you're eating 900 calories and think that's good, I'd rather see that you're eating like shit and you're eating 3,000 calories because now we got something to work with. But track their calories for a few days and see what they're eating, and then say, okay, well, let's start making some adjustments from there. So if somebody's maintaining their body weight on 3,000 calories a day from a practical standpoint, if we start taking out, 500-600 calories from that, they should start dropping some body fat.
Right. It's that simple, huh? That sounds so simple.
It really is. As opposed to, I like doing that as opposed to just
you went to school to be a doctor to fucking learn that. Like, hey, you're fat, and what you're currently doing is you're eating a little bit too much. So let's have you eat a little bit less, chubby guy.
From a long-term perspective, it can be more complex than that.
Of course,
for the most part.
Well, it's good. It's good to know
I believe
all the
Einstein
details.
said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it.
That's a good point.
So it's one of those things that. I learned very, very interesting stuff about nutrition, but I'd say I learned in a way more things from coaching, because there's a difference between what will work physically and what will actually. I tell people above anything else, I'm a pragmatist. Okay. And I'll give you an example, Mark, since you have a gym and you coach people with training and whatnot. You could give somebody the best routine in the world, but if they hate it and they don't enjoy it, are they going to work hard at it?
Nope.
No.
Exactly. So sometimes you have to throw people a bone and say, okay, well, let's do this instead, even though it may not be the most optimal thing for gaining strength or gaining muscle. If they enjoy this particular thing better, then they're going to work harder at it and probably end up gaining more strength and muscle than they would have if you tried to force them to do something they didn't like, right. So that's one of those things, and I kind of look at that from a dieting perspective too. But yeah, I like to have people track, do some food recalls, say, okay, what do I typically eat per day? Okay, well, I'm typically eating 300 grams of carbs and 100 grams of fat and 120 grams of protein. Okay, well, let's pump that protein up to 1 gram per pound. Let's cut 500 calories from carbs and fats, and let's see what happens. And then if you're losing fat, great. If not, let's take another 100 calories off and see if that gets things started. So, kind of people will ask me, well, what about these, the Harris-Benedict equation, and what about, getting my resting metabolic rate done? I said, well, all those things are fine, and it's more data. But from a practical perspective, I just like food recalls because that's already incorporating your lifestyle into everything and saying, okay, from a practical perspective, this is what I'm eating, and am I losing weight? Answer, no. Okay, well, then we need to take away from this.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We talk about training in a similar way that you're talking about diet. We talk about, a lot of people inside of super training practice the conjugate system. We'll, switch exercises up, and it just ends up being more fun that way. When you're doing, you're not doing the same type of deadlift every single week. You're doing a rack pull, or you're doing a deadlift against some bands or some chains, and the following week you got good mornings and so on. So it gives you a different challenge each time rather than having to do the same old thing. And I know some of your methods are actually similar, even though that you use the same barbell, use the same exercise. From what Mike has been telling me, you've been kind of mixing up repetitions. You have a heavy day, then you have a lighter day where you do more reps. So there again is some variant in within your training system that is allowing you to have fun. I
do. Right now I'm following kind of I was doing kind of daily undulating periodization, and now I'm kind of doing an auto-regulation cycle. But I actually, for my most part, right now, I'm just doing basic squat, bench, deadlifts. I'm not doing any kind of accessory or anything like that, other than for just, show muscles, arms and calves and that sort of stuff, so I can stay pretty. But right now, I'm having fun with that. But about a year ago, I just gotten done with having a bad meet. It's a long story, but I had a bad meet, didn't perform well, and felt like I didn't get I don't want to say fair judging, because I don't want to imply that somebody had it out to get me. I just didn't agree with the judge's call on a squat I missed.
Right.
So I was kind of disheartened, and the training became not as fun for me. Well, I was like, all right, well, I'm not having fun with it, so I'm going to switch to kind of a more bodybuilding style training. Bodybuilding style training, but I still did some squats, deadlifts, bench press. Well, I actually got a little bit stronger. Not as strong as I probably would have gotten if I'd been fired up about my powerlifting training, really putting a lot into it. But I still got stronger than I was spinning my wheels with powerlifting training, just because I wasn't having fun with it. Now, a year later, or 6 months later, I kind of got reinvigorated, and I went back into kind of my just basic squat, bench, dead training cycle. But it kind of took that refreshing my palate to get there. So again, something where I could have looked at it and said, well, this isn't the most optimal thing for me to do based on powerlifting, but from a practical perspective, that's what I needed at the time.
Yeah, you needed a little vacation from what you were currently doing.
Exactly.
What about in terms of training frequency, per body part or per lift? How does it kind of compare from your bodybuilding phases or years now to powerlifting?
Pretty similar, actually. People will ask me about this and when I think about training volume and frequency, and it's kind of like metabolism. It's not static, okay? I squat, bench, and deadlift 2 to 4 times a week of each. So, right now I'm benching 4 times a week, squatting 3 times a week, pulling twice a week. But I have done it before where I was squatting 4 times a week, benching 4 times a week, and deadlifting 3 times a week. And I made good progress on that. But I've been training for 15 years. I can't take somebody who just walked in the gym and throw that kind of volume at them. I mean, one, from a practical perspective, they'll get injured. And two, they'll just get beaten down.
How many days a week do you have wherever you live?
Well,
sounds like you have more days than us. We have 7 on the West Coast.
I'm always putting together squats and bench, and sometimes I'm doing squat, bench, and dead in the same workout.
Oh,
but hey,
I was like, man, he's got a longer week than us. That son of a bitch.
I figure I got a squat, bench, and dead in the same workout in a meet, so might as well learn to do it in a workout.
Right.
But I worked up to that level of volume over time, and I mean the scientific data shows that for progress to continue, volume is the biggest determinant of strength and hypertrophy out there. Now, that's not to say it's the only thing that matters. It's just a dominant factor.
Right.
And, volume can go up through getting stronger because now you're lifting more weight over the same amount of sets, or you can add in, more reps, more sets, that sort of thing. And I think it's important to track your volume in terms of total poundage that you're lifting during a workout and see, if you're progressing with that over time, because you should be as your strength goes up. And, I think that I would tell you that I think most people limit themselves in terms of what they can tolerate exercise-wise. I mean, I get a lot of people say, well, I can't train legs more than once a week. I'm sore for a week. And I'm like, well, no, you're sore for a week because you only train them once a week. Okay? Yeah. If you trained them twice a week, guess what would happen? Your body would adapt and you would stop getting so freaking sore. And so it's one of those, like now I hardly ever even get sore, even when I'm doing, 20 sets of heavy squats per week,
It's probably all them steroids.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But, actually, because people will tell people, to be honest, people have used that and said, oh, see, there's no way you can tolerate that if Dave is natural. And I'll tell people, I'm like, look, if you're natural, you're going to actually need more frequent training stimulus because the training stimulus has an anabolic response for about 48 hours. That's it. There's a maximal anabolic duration of about 48 hours.
That's just
so if you're only working out something once per week, it's growing for 2 days and then it's just sitting there for the rest of the week.
Look at every other athlete and every other sport. I mean, that's just a dumb argument. Basketball players are playing 7 days a week. Does that mean they're all on shit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe one or two are, but Michael Phelps, I don't know if he's on shit or not. That guy's swimming, 4 hours a day, and he's recovering fine.
Well,
he actually swims more to recover.
Yeah,
it's an excuse to be lazy in some aspects. But let me give you my favorite line from my friend Dr. Mike Zordos, who is a professor at FAU who. This guy's legit crazy. I love Mike, but he's crazy. He squatted one time to a max 100 days in a row just to see what would happen.
That's like some Bulgarian shit.
Exactly. And actually, he put like 50 pounds on his squat doing that.
Yeah.
But he said one time, okay, because somebody was giving him this argument that what about overtraining this, and that. He said, because they were trying to say that once per week is the most you can tolerate for squats. And Mike said, if somebody kidnapped your family and the ransom was they were going to kill them unless you put 100 pounds on your squat in 16 weeks, would you squat one time a week?
Right.
The answer is hell no. Right. So we know intuitively that's not correct. You know what I mean? But it kind of takes that gun to the head to make it apparent. But if that actually happened, what would you do? You would squat like every freaking day. You know what I mean? It's like I look at weightlifting is a skill. People don't think of it as a skill, but it is a skill, and you get more skilled at it the more frequent you do it. Now, it's like a pitcher in the major leagues. They pitch once every 5 days, but are they just sitting there the rest of the days that they have quote-unquote off? No, they're throwing long toss, they're throwing soft toss. They're not going with the same intensity that they do on that fifth day, but they're still doing it every day.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways of going about it. I think the truth of it is once you have kind of mastered the lift, then you can start to work towards doing the lift less frequently, like in the case of like the Lilla Bridges, or in the case of like someone like Milanichev. Like Andrei Milanichev, he doesn't even bother any longer with doing assistance work. He doesn't need a base. He needs to continue to refine his skill, and he needs to continue to just throw heavy weight on his back until he can't handle it anymore. So it's going to be different for each person. But I agree that I think forcing the frequency issue is a smart way to go about doing it, so that your body can handle more. You're going to be able to handle more exercise. You're going to be less sore overall. You can always pull back, and I think what happens when you pull back is you're going to get a nice rebound from it.
Exactly, and that's a lot of people misinterpret that. A lot of people, like for example, this is what happened in the 80s or in the 90s too, when very kind of low volume training came back in vogue. people would be doing high volume protocols and they would be getting overreached, being sore constantly, not feeling well, strength would be going down. And what would happen was they would switch to a low volume routine and then they would recover, and they would actualize those gains. They would have that rebound effect. And so they thought, oh, it's from that low volume. Well, no, it's not from the low volume. You made those gains while you were on the higher volume. You just actualized them on the low volume because you allowed yourself to have that rebound effect. But that's why it's important to put tapers into training. And that's why we taper for a meet. I mean, Olympic athletes purposefully overtrain themselves heading into a meet or heading into the Olympics so that they can get that rebound effect. Sprinters do that. So I think people miss that. I mean, I do that. But again, Dr. Zordos has a great line. He said, okay, so you feel a certain way during training. Who gives a shit how you feel during training as long as you PR on the platform?
Right.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
So if you're getting weaker in training or you feel like crap during training, who cares as long as you do well on meet day?
Your training should always be harder than the contest itself.
Absolutely. And I mean, last for like a week and a half ago, I was kind of getting into that phase in my training block where it was getting very difficult. I was feeling like crap, not recovering well, getting a little bit more stiffness and that sort of thing. And, I did a taper for a week, went in and crushed my old PRs.
Let's just kind of start to wrap this up a little bit. So let's just have you kind of just sum up some of the things we talked about a little bit. So let's just say...
hold on. Hey.
Whoa. Jim pushed the wrong button.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, hold on. There we go.
Put that on the outtakes.
And we're back.
Yeah, the outro.
Yeah, the outro, I guess. Anyway,
I didn't touch anything. It just happened to still be there.
Oh, bam. So yeah, just kind of sum everything up. Let's say, I'm coming to you. I'm fucking fat. I want to drop 20 pounds. Where do I start? Where do I start? How do I track my calories and that sort of thing? And also, do you recommend cardio to help drop people down in weight a little bit?
Okay, so with the tracking and that sort of thing, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to, again, have you kind of track things, see where you're at. And there's some great apps out there for that. Like myfitnesspal.com is actually pretty darn good for a free app. So you can do it on your phone or on the computer. And then there's an iPhone app called My Macros Plus, which is really, really helpful. It's actually designed by a former client of mine, and it's very good. And so I would have somebody just do that. Just whatever you're eating for the next few days, plug it in. Let's see where you're at. And then let's start taking it from there. Let's start adjusting from there, because that is not going to blow up their lifestyle as much. And hopefully they're going to be able to, I always like to make a diet as close to what they're already doing as I possibly can, but still get results, okay? Because it's be more likely they're going to stick with something like that. So I'm going to say, okay, what's the least we can cut from and still get a response? And then as far as cardio goes, I think cardio can be beneficial for fat loss, but there is definitely a negative interference with strength and hypertrophy. I mean, no matter what you do, cardio has a negative interference.
So that would interfere with your metabolism, because earlier we mentioned that gaining muscle mass can be a really good attribute for increasing your metabolism, correct? And
in the long term, especially the low intensity cardio has been shown that your body adapts to that, and eventually it can actually lower your long term metabolic rate. So I recommend if you're going to do anything, make it high intensity and make it short duration, because the amount of duration is directly proportional to how much of a negative interference you get. Now, my friend, Dr. Zordos, is actually running a study right now where he's going to compare, and actually, there is no debate on low intensity versus high intensity. High intensity burns more fat in a shorter period of time and maintains strength and muscle better. So if you look at the data, that's what it shows.
And what are we talking about here? About maybe 6 to 8 sprints, 30 seconds
even
a piece
4 to 6
or so?
sprints. There was a study done where they looked at 4 to 6 30-second sprints. And when I say sprint, it doesn't have to be an actual sprint. You could sprint an elliptical, sprint on a stationary bike, whatever it is.
Right.
Jack the resistance up and go hard. But just for 30 seconds, 4 to 6 sprints, each one was better, almost twice as, 50% better for fat loss than an hour of incline treadmill walking.
Wow.
Okay.
And the rest in between would be
however long you need to
yes,
recover and feel like you can go 100% on your next
3
one.
minutes, 4 minutes, doesn't matter too much.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go 10 minutes or whatever, but
Right.
2, 3, 4 minutes, that's fine. But actually, Dr. Zordos is going to look at, okay, well, suppose that's better. So he's going to compare low intensity cardio versus high intensity intervals versus just lifting lighter weights faster. Okay, and he's going to standardize for total work. Okay, so that'll be the standard. And the hypothesis is because the weights are more analogous to what you're doing, that you'll actually have better strength, muscle retention from doing weights faster. Now,
something we've been doing here at my gym is, especially with some of the CrossFit people, we've been having them do timed exercises, such as band deadlift for 30 seconds or for like a minute. And holy shit, does that wipe?
You can get your heart rate up there.
Oh my God, it wipes people the hell out, man. It's a good thrasher, But so that's really interesting. Interesting to hear the conclusion to that.
Yeah, I'll definitely, as soon as I know, I'll put it out there because I think that'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure what to expect, but it wouldn't surprise me if they had better strength and muscle retention from the lifting. It'll be interesting to see if they get better body fat loss. That's what I'll be interested in.
So it's pretty simple. Just get an app on your phone, start to count your calories, track your macros, see where you're at currently, and then deduct maybe 250 or 500, 600 calories. Something like that, and then kind of track your progress from there.
Absolutely. I mean, that's there's differences between individuals, but for the most part, that's a good starting point for the average person.
For some people out there that aren't powerlifting or bodybuilding, they're somewhere in between. They're just out there lifting. How many days a week should they be hitting the gym? About 4 or 5 minimum or so?
Well, it just depends, right? So I always tell people you're going to get out of it what you put into it. So if you just want to look decent, lift decent, eat decent.
Right.
If you want to look great, you're going to have to lift great, eat great,
Yeah.
So it's one of those things, I would say to get the health benefits of resistance exercise, and the longevity and bone mineral density, 3-4 times a week is going to be plenty.
Awesome.
What do you got coming up, Layne? You got some camps coming up. You've already mentioned the Nationals in a couple weeks. What else you got on your agenda coming up?
So actually, in Nationals are in Aurora, Colorado, and then in Denver, 2 days after Nationals, we're myself, Dr. Zordos, Ben Escrow, are holding a day camp at Armbrust Pro Gym there, and that's already sold out. Well, actually, I think we may have like one spot left. So that's almost sold out. I anticipate being sold out this week, and then I'm going to Scotland for the SFN Expo in August. I'm going to have a day camp there. And then I'm also going to be presenting at their expo. And then in September, I'll be at the Olympia. And then in October, I'm taking myself and some other pros and experts, Brooke Erickson, Ben Escrow, Ryan Doris, Dr. Zordos again, and my friend Paul Ravella, and we're going up to Canada. We're going to Toronto. We're doing what we call a VIP camp there. And that's already sold out. That's sold out in like 3 days. Wow. And so we're doing some of that stuff, and also actually this week we have our big kind of flagship camp in Tampa, where I invite in like some of the top exercise and nutrition professionals, experts, and as well as professional bodybuilders and figure athletes here, and we have a camp, and that actually never even went public. That was sold out so fast that we just made it available to my clients, and it sold out. The first one sold out within 5 hours, and we had so many people requesting more spots that we actually made a second camp. That's great. And that sold out within 48 hours. So this whole week we're running camps here in Tampa, so that's going to be fun. But it's brutal, but it's fun.
Is there a place where people can start to follow all the different things that you have going on?
Absolutely. My website's a good spot, biolayne.com. My Facebook, I keep very updated, facebook.com/Layne Norton. And then Twitter, I'm keeping that updated, and that's at BioLayne. And also Instagram. Instagram is also at BioLayne.
You're all over the place.
Yep, and then all full-fledged, and then YouTube, of course. So I'm youtube.com/BioLayne. So any of those will keep you very updated on what's going on with me, and hopefully we'll see some of the listeners out at some of the camps we're doing.
So one last final question: with all this eating and all this nutrition, it's got to go somewhere. And so, you have any poop suggestions for people out there? More fiber, more coffee?
Coffee is what I call the poop juice.
Oh, there you go. Bam.
It work very
Poop
well
juice.
for most people. But no, I mean, fiber is actually can be misleading. Fiber definitely can help with irregularity. However,
Can
a
clog
lot
you
of
up.
people that overconsume fiber, it actually causes them to be backed up as well. If you eat too much fiber, that can actually cause you to be constipated. And especially if you eat too much fiber and don't compensate by drinking more water.
Yeah.
So make sure if you're eating more than 40, 50 grams of fiber per day that you're drinking plenty of water, because otherwise you will get constipated from that.
So you heard it here first from the doctor. Skip your veggies and drink more coffee.
Poop juice. There you go.
All right. It was great having you on the show, and take care.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
All
Thanks
right,
a
thank
lot,
you.
Layne.
Thanks, man.
Is he off?
Poop
Yeah.
juice.
Is that guy a real doctor?
Poop juice could be something else.
I don't know, man.
Poop juice. I know.
Yeah,
Disgusting.
that's like a good fact, but a bad name.
Poop juice.
Other than poop juice, I could talk to that guy all day.
Oh,
He's just-
we could talk to that guy for like 4 hours.
I know. We'd have
I'd get a little bored. 4 hours of talking really
You'd
wears
have
me
an
out.
erection the entire time.
we just did an hour 25 with him. Okay.
Yeah, no,
So,
I could
like,
tell when we
and
started that it was going to be.
Well, we have a lot of
Long.
questions.
I
Yeah.
had a ton of questions that like there was no good place to put them. We'll just keep having.
I
them
got
on.
more
We were-
questions. Layne, come back. What body fat percentage? We talk about this all the time. What body fat percentage is like optimal for some performance? You see
well,
these CrossFitters
I
that
mean,
are
you
question.
can just. I think with stuff like that, I mean, he was a lot more practical than he was the first time he came on the show, which is interesting.
Yeah,
But I think that if you just look at who's great, you just go from there. You know what I
All
mean?
right, so look like me.
Yeah. There
All
you
right,
go.
we're doing okay.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I don't know. You can just kind of start with like LeBron. He's pretty damn lean.
Yeah. How do I look like that?
But I think there can be a little wiggle room in there. You could probably be 3 to 4% fatter than him,
Right.
or 2% leaner than him, or something like that,
Yeah.
without any ill effects. But you see a lot of guys, that are great athletes hovering. This just depends on the sport, but they're hovering in the 8 to 12%, I'd say, range.
We didn't even see some of these.
It's hard to tell
these-
exactly.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because these football guys have the most jacked arms and shoulders,
Yeah.
but they're probably carrying a little something on their tummies.
Yeah, like Strahan. I mean, he's a freak athlete. He was real tall. He was fatter in the beginning.
How
of
did
his
he
career.
get popular? He's
Well-
on like every TV show now and stuff.
Well,
it's
he's
that tooth gap.
He's all
yeah.
right. Like he's kind of funny. but
Mark's going to be on TV anytime because
He-
he's got that
he's
tooth
not
gap.
that funny.
no, he's good. He's
Okay.
perfect for that show.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because like moms probably
Not
love
that I
him.
watch it all the time. Not
That
I'm
show's
just
great. I mean,
sitting at
I've heard
home
it's pretty
doing
good.
nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy shit!
Our
We got some-
script just flew.
Yeah, we
God,
got
it
some
wasn't one of the
wind.
cameras. God damn.
The weather's going nuts here, man. It was like 110 degrees yesterday, and right now it feels like it's 80 and
It was
breezy.
so gross in here yesterday.
Oh my
It
god.
was disgusting. Yeah.
It was nasty.
But anyway, at your point that he's become even more practical than the last time we talked to him a few months ago, I think that maybe, and this is a question that I was hoping to get to, but I'll do it next time.
I'll answer it. I'll
He's-
pretend.
Well, he's doing a lot of seminars and boot camps and things like that, and I'm just wondering. And you've talked before about the fact that you'll learn when you do a seminar,
oh yeah.
and it's like, well, what is he learning out there from talking to people and people? I mean,
Yeah.
the people who are coming to the seminars aren't necessarily people with problems. They're
He's
people
learned-
who are working with clients themselves.
Yeah. He's learned what I've always known, that school is a waste of time.
Layne's
He went to school for 5,000 years to learn that, to tell people to eat less food.
it's true.
Like, you're eating too much, that's why you're fucking fat. Eat a little
Yeah.
bit less, exercise a little bit more,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
you'll
the
be heading in the right
The
direction.
truth is he's at the top of his game
Yeah.
in his department, and he deals with professional, competitive bodybuilders,
Right.
figure girls, whatever. And some of the CrossFit people we deal with, at Super Training, or even the members
Yeah.
at Super Training, are just more average Joes. Ryan Spencer works in the Capitol, this and that.
Right.
Casey, he puts in floors. He works a hard construction job. We work with more average Joes than Layne does. Layne works with the advanced, and those guys' educational foundation is already beyond a lot of people that we deal with. I mean,
Right.
that's the truth. So he can be way more advanced.
Right.
Right.
I mean, we're dumb shits. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, you can hammer them with more facts, but
And more detail.
it's great that he's able to. What's insane is he's able to remember all that shit.
oh my, yeah.
Like, I could read something one day and totally forget about it the fucking next. He's able to really hold on to that information and whip it out as needed.
So to
like
speak.
he's
Yeah.
whipping it out.
Give me a hey now.
Hey now.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just kind of pumps that information out whenever he needs to use it, which is awesome. He's like, there's a study on that. There's a study on this, study on that.
And if we asked him, he could probably name the name and date if we really asked him.
What's great, though, too, is he's able to refer to many studies because studies aren't always that effective.
And I think we even mentioned this in the last podcast. He never says, I think that, or this and that. He said studies show that this is what looks like it happens.
It's hard to find holes in his story, basically.
Yeah. He's very well spoken. He covers
whereas
his
you
ground.
talk to other nutritionalists or dietitians or however you want to say it, you're going to find a lot of holes in what they're saying because they're not as intelligent as he is.
And why, if you ask some of them why,
they don't know why.
Well, why do I eat 1 gram of protein per pound? Well, he just said because studies show that that's what's optimal. Any more won't give you any more protein synthesis.
The poverty carbohydrate or poverty calorie thing. That was fucking brilliant because you see so many people doing that. They're on the freaking elliptical.
It makes so much sense.
And they're in somewhat of a calorie deficit. They have no idea that what they're doing is just totally working against them.
Well, I think it's Chrissy said in the other podcast that cardio is kind of for now and lifting's for life.
Right.
Maybe you said that. That sounds too smart for you.
No, that was me. That was me.
And it's just true. Yeah, like cardio burns some stuff now.
No, what Chrissy said that was brilliant is nobody ever regretted doing a workout.
Yeah, afterwards.
They regret missing them, which is fucking awesome. That's really cool.
I think that's true.
But that's not true for me because I get hurt all the time.
Layne kind of said the same thing. It's like, it doesn't matter if you feel like shit during a workout. It's true. Like, if you actually have powerlifted for any amount of time, you feel like shit during workouts.
Well, I mean, how good does Rich Froning feel when he's doing all,
I don't know. I've never touched him.
You never felt him up?
No.
Not even a little bit?
Just with my eyes.
I mean, he's got to feel awful. We see Ben Alderman training. It's killing him, right?
Yeah, his face looks in pain.
What always gets me is these CrossFitters at the end of the WOD, man, they're on the floor and they're making faces and they're dying. And they look like kids flopping at a soccer game, you know?
And for some of them, it's like it's a means to, I'm going to go to regionals. I'm going to try to perform well there. And I'm hoping that I can get to the next thing. But for many of them, it doesn't mean any of that.
Right.
They just like the hard work.
Right. They get something from it. They get some kind of
which isn't everybody.
It was great. I have a friend that I think she grew up swimming, maybe playing a little soccer, nothing super competitive, and then she just did her first workout here at Midtown with Ben, and she was Olympic lifting a little bit, maybe some deadlifts here and there, and she comes over and she's sweating her brains off. She was just learning clean form and stuff. It was great. I think she does yoga and she stays active. She's fit, but she's never lifted. And she comes over to me and is like, I felt like such a badass.
Yeah.
And that's what you do. You grab like a fucking barbell and you move that shit around, regardless of the weight. You feel like a badass. You got a big old hunk of metal in your hand, and you're just chucking it around the gym.
Jim said he didn't start powerlifting until you were, 40?
Yeah, I was over 40.
Yeah, I mean, he was 40. So he did some lifting before.
Right.
But then powerlifting probably made you feel empowered in a way.
Yeah, it's not the same thing.
Shit, I didn't know I could do that.
Empowered lifting?
I very, very seldom ever lifted with another person,
Right.
I was always like, you need to get a spot, and that's about it.
Yeah. Having a little bit of encouragement, having someone spot you, having someone teach you the right form, then you're able to kind of mimic what they just said, and you're able to perform better is a fucking awesome feeling.
Right.
And for women, women have kind of always been taught to, be ladylike and stuff like that. Or at least you hope that someone taught them something about that at some point. But now they're flipping tires, and they're doing Olympic lifting, they're doing almost kind of more manly type stuff. They're letting barbells drop from overhead, and they're grunting and making noise. And now they're able to kind of play with the boys, so to speak, And I think for a lot of girls, it's empowering, and they also don't have to worry about, if they're doing the wrong thing or the right thing inside of a commercial gym. I think women don't want to go into the man zone because they just think guys are either perving on them, which they probably are, or they're just like, that girl looks retarded. Why is she doing that?
Yeah.
Pervin on them anyway. Wherever they are. The question is just how comfortable they are with that.
Pervin Mervin.
It seems to me like in CrossFit gyms, they're just comfortable with it.
Yeah, they like the pervin.
Yeah, well, that's why they're naked.
Yeah, that's why they wouldn't dress.
Why do you always kick my bottle?
They wouldn't dress like that to work
bitch.
out if they didn't find it comfortable in all aspects.
Yeah. Anyways, the Spurs are going to win the finals in 6 games, and I think that's it for this podcast.
Son of a bitch. Come on, LeBron. Step it up, buddy.
They're too good. Kawhi Leonard is ridiculous.
They're tied now,
What about our boy Kaepernick?
No, 2-1.
Cashing in.
2-1 Spurs.
Kaepernick, cashing in.
The Cap. We need to get in touch with him. I can get in touch with
What
Cap.
did he get, 60 millies?
I knew his right
90 or
tackle or his
What the
right
hell did he get?
guard.
160 million.
106.
12.
5 years.
Yeah, 12 bonus
6 years,
and like
something.
20 guaranteed. It's a bunch of fluff.
12 milli. Signing bonus?
It looks good in the shower.
What about Wyclef deadlifting? How'd you like that video?
That was great.
Wyclef doing some CrossFit, and he like deadlifts 300. It's a long video. It was good. But then he brings his trainer. That chick is jacked. Some chick at like Reebok Miami or Reebok New York, I think, gym.
Yeah.
Whatever. And then he takes her in the studio, and they do a CrossFit rap.
She's like playing a piano and
Yeah,
shit.
she's jamming out. It was amazing.
I gotta tell you, I'm always in high admiration of people who have a physical skill and some kind of other skill, like music. That just blows my mind that somebody's.
They're different brain patterns.
Yeah,
I think.
different intelligences.
Like people that are really, 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 really good at music can't like even walk.
Yeah,
you know, but you can be pretty good at both.
Yeah, but if you can play a sing along piano, man, you're my best friend.
Oh yeah, I could play some John Mayer or something.
Henry
Throw me
Rollins
a guitar.
can lift and he can sing.
Really?
Who?
Henry Rollins.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
I don't think he lifts the same way
He
he
kind of doesn't even really sing. I guess he just like makes noise, but whatever.
He makes noise.
Oh,
he does a lot
like
of spoken word stuff now.
Yeah, he does that too. All right, you want to take this one in for a landing?
You guys can follow me at Silent Mike with 2Ks on Instagram. We're trying to pump out this social media. We got some entertainment on that sucker. We got some information on that sucker. And check out YouTube's supertraining.tv. I think I mentioned that in the beginning. And now we're just rambling. Markel?
That sounded dumb.
All
Do
right.
it again.
Ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and follow me at Silent Mike. God damn it. Take three.
It's just getting worse.
All right, I'm going home. I got to go slang, man. We got some slanging to do.
Yeah, we got to slang some
People have no idea about the slingshot. If you don't know about the slingshot, you're living in
no idea about anything.
They don't know what we're doing.
People don't know nothing about nothing.
We're in the lab all the time.
We got to give congratulations out to my boy, Silent Mike, who recently got set up with Reebok.
Ooh.
He
a mini scholarship.
Was, I guess, noticed, I guess you'd say, or recognized for his various talents.
You better recognize.
What's your talent?
So, like, I was telling Mark, my dream as a kid playing basketball is like to get a fucking sneaker deal. That's all you want as a kid.
Right.
And I was okay at basketball. Like I can hold my own damn. Like
He's white.
Even right now, I'll go play just about any court anywhere and keep
I'll
up.
fucking dunk on you all day.
And-
Skyhook.
Yeah, and I didn't get a scholarship for how my around the back pass. I got a scholarship for being me.
There you go.
What a terrible decision on their part.
Yeah. Anyway, we had some Reebok people out here. They filmed some stuff with us, and they saw Mike as an up and coming trainer, and so he's part of their Reebok One Ambassador program, which basically just means he gets some free shit from them, which is pretty cool.
Team Reebok shit.
Yeah.
I'll pimp them out.
And I'm at Mark Smelly Bell on the Twitters and on the Instagrams. And on the Instagrams, I've been giving a jacked and tan tip of the day. I try to do it every day, but probably more like every other day.
But you only got one tip.
And yeah, what?
I mean, a day.
Who told you what? And may all your shits be tapered.
Jim McD, STTV. Buy some stuff from the supertraining.tv store because this just keeps getting more and more expensive, and I ain't got no scholarships. Follow us on Twitter at STGymSack, Facebook /SupertrainingGym, and that's plenty for this time.
Subscribe to Power Magazine at thepowermagazine.com. If you choose the digital edition, you can catch up on all the great back issues, take your training to the next level with Slingshot products at howmuchyoubench.net, and look for BSN products including NO Explode at bodybuilding.com. Mark Bell's PowerCast is a production of supertraining.tv.